Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Now, in today's video, guys, I'm finally doing my review on the new Christopher Nolan movie, Oppenheimer. I didn't get to see it until yesterday, so I'm finally doing the review for it. Otherwise, typically, I would have watched this movie on Thursday night, on the premiere night. But I finally got to see it, and before we get on to the review, we still got a lot of movies coming up in the future. I believe next week, or this upcoming week, we got the Talk to Me movie, which looks pretty interesting. And then in the month of August, we have quite a few movies as well. We have Meg, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Blue Beetle, Gran Turismo, all of which look interesting, so stay tuned. There is a lot of potential content coming your way. And I think that's pretty much it. Let's just get straight onto this review because there is a lot of great stuff that I would like to talk about. Obviously, this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Probably the most anticipated movie of the year, at least for standalone movies. I'd say for horror movies, since this channel is more horror-driven, I would go with probably Evil Dead Rise, but this was definitely my most anticipated standalone movie. Particularly because I heard about this movie, I believe, last year. I saw a poster for it, which really intrigued me, and saw what the movie was about, saw the actors that were involved, saw that it was directed by Christopher Nolan, and instantly I was like, yep, I'm getting for the tickets to this movie as soon as I possibly can, and I am going to see it. And more and more hype just developed for this movie as it got closer and closer and closer. I felt like I was waiting for this movie forever, and I finally got to see it just yesterday. I've just been waiting so long for this movie, and overall, the wait definitely paid off. I got to see this. If you didn't know, there was actually two different versions that Christopher Nolan did for this movie. He did the regular aspect ratio version, and he did the scope aspect ratio, so it's like a more wider screen, which made the test running of the atomic bomb in this movie, made that experience even more incredible. I don't have any local IMAX theaters, so I just got to see it in the best way possible with a few friends, and I even wore a full-on suit, as you've seen in my out-of-theater reaction, just to make it the best possible experience, and I absolutely loved it. But like I said in my out-of-theater reaction, the experience of watching the atomic bomb go off was just scratching the surface of all of the great things that there is in this movie. And I'm definitely kind of a history nerd, so I really, really love anything involving history, particularly 20th century history. And I really like how this movie approaches like the World War II perspective around the Manhattan Project, and approaches it at a individual perspective instead of a more broader perspective like we're used to when we're studying history. In this movie, we're just focusing on this one character. This movie is about Oppenheimer and about how the events of creating the atomic bomb affected his life beforehand, during, and after. And it is all kind of going back and forth in this movie. This movie doesn't have a very linear timeline. It kind of bounces back and forth between different time periods. And I just really, really love the approach that Christopher Nolan took with this movie. I really like these types of history movies that reenact certain times in history. I'm not really a big fan of historical fiction, so I'm not really as big of a fan as like movies like Titanic, obviously. I'm more of a fan of these reenactment movies, and I really love how this movie was a character study of Oppenheimer. I think it just made it really, really great. So yeah, I guess finally just getting into the positives. Let's just get into the juice of this movie. I guess, first of all, just getting it out of the way, the experience of watching the test run of the atomic bomb was really, really, really great. There was just a lot of build-up to it. It happened about, I would say, midway in the movie, and there was certainly a lot of build-up to this movie. Admittedly, the beginning of the movie has a bit of a slow start, but then once Oppenheimer starts to get all these different scientists gathered together and is ready to get this atomic bomb created, so that he can win this race against the Nazis, you really start to get excited for when the bomb is going to go off, and you're just ready for that experience. And so there's a lot of build up to it, even though it's a little bit of a slow start. But then once you get the ball rolling, you're just waiting for that moment. and when it happens, it is an absolutely great experience. Um, just visually, very, very stunning. I really liked how they went and did visual effects rather than making it full on CGI. And also, just like, even after the bomb goes off, you're just waiting for the sound to kick in. Like, Christopher Nolan plays it very, very smart. And waits, like, I think it took a good minute, maybe even over a minute, for the sound to finally kick in. And while that's happening, your heart is just racing. You're waiting for that moment where you just hear that boom, and when it happens, you're just like, wow, like, it was like that finisher to watching it go off. And it was just a really, really great experience overall. But like I said, that's just scratching the surface to the great things that I have to say about this movie. This movie had things that I liked about it that I wasn't expecting to like about it. Like I said, I was going into this movie purely for the history side to it, wasn't really in for the drama side. But Christopher Nolan proves that he's able to do these types of drama-driven, dialogue-heavy movies and still make it interesting. I'm not that type of person who is that into these drama-heavy movies, but he was able to make it interesting, even though I'm not that into those types of movies. Like, the beginning part of this movie is kind of more talking about his early life and his love life and kind of the mistakes that he made then, while also going through some of the hearings with Louis Strauss, who's played by Robert Downey Jr., and he's kind of he's having to answer all these questions about Oppenheimer and his potential relations with like the Communist Party and things like that. And so they kind of introduce that into the movie and focus on his love life as well at the same time. There's a lot of different things going on. And then they get to him gathering all the scientists together to start creating the nuclear bomb. Then you have, the nuclear bomb going off and things like that. And then the last, I would say probably a little over an hour of this movie is just full-on drama, dialogue, and it is intense the whole way through. Very, very, and also very, very interesting. And that's something that I was not really expecting, but it was really, really great. It was very, very intense, and I really, really loved it. I loved how Christopher Nolan kind of sprinkled it a little bit at the beginning of the movie while we were building up to the creation of the atomic bomb and testing it off. And then the back half of the movie was just Oppenheimer trying to kind of like win over his case, and you have all these different family members and things like that. All these people who have had relations with Oppenheimer throughout all of his life are having to go through all these intense interviews and things like that. And it's really, really great. I wasn't expecting it to be as intense as it was or as interesting as it was. Admittedly, I did get a little bit confused and lost at times because there is so much dialogue. But I think for the average person, they're going to be able to get a pretty simple understanding on what's going on. You're not going to be... Like, this movie is very, very fast-paced despite being 3 hours long. There are so many things being introduced at the beginning of the movie, and so many things being talked about, and so many different characters, like, everywhere, that you're not going to be able to know 100% exactly what's going on all the time, but enough to be able to get a general understanding on what's going on. So it was still very, very intense for me on the back half of this movie, and which was something that I was absolutely not expecting. So yeah, dialogue, was not expecting for that to be intense. I mean, literally, I was sweating, my heart was beating at the back half of the movie, even after the bomb went off, which is by just sheer dialogue. It was just crazy to me. So one thing I want to mention before I get on to the positives, I apologize for any audio issues that may have happened before this cut, but continuing on with the positives, this movie also, like many other Christopher Nolan movies, is very, very dark, and I like that Christopher Nolan emphasizes the toll that the creation of the atomic bomb has taken on Oppenheimer, how he feels that he has created this weapon of mass destruction, and that he has now made this weapon that he can never go back on this. The world will forever be changed because of his creation. And so he feels like everything that happens after this is going to be all of his fault. And I really like how Christopher Nolan emphasizes that. For everybody else, the creation of this nuclear bomb, its successful explosion and everything like that, this is great. Like, they see the end of the war for this. But for Oppenheimer, he sees the beginning of many, many future, even deadlier wars. And I really love how Christopher Nolan emphasizes that, especially in these visions that Oppenheimer has after the test run. He has, like, this speech in front of, a crowd of people that are very, very happy, and he's like can't hear anything, like the audio shuts off for a minute, and all he sees is just a bunch of dead people, and it's just a really, really dark scene, and I really, really love it. One of the standout scenes in this movie. I really, really love that. He also has many other visions throughout the movie, but that was one of the standout scenes. Another one that I really want to mention, while we're talking about some of the dark elements to this movie, there is a scene where he goes to visit with Harry Truman, the President Truman, about his concerns for this could potentially start a nuclear war. And Truman just says some, like, really, really selfish things to Oppenheimer, like, and it's just, like, completely out of the blue, and you're just like, damn, like, wow. And so that was another standout scene for me as well. And, with this being a character study, Christopher Nolan is not trying to paint Oppenheimer as this absolute hero. For everybody, like, for the average American citizen, that's what he is. They're really, really happy. They see the end of war with this. But Christopher Nolan is emphasizing that Oppenheimer isn't this perfect character. He has made many, many mistakes throughout his life, particularly in his love life, and he definitely has many, many flaws. And he also shows that in other characters in this movie as well, but obviously this is about Oppenheimer, so particularly in his character, and I really loved how he did that. He wasn't just trying to paint Oppenheimer as this perfect hero. He was trying to show that it isn't all sunshine and rainbows for your perceived hero all the time, and I really, really loved that. Also, just one kind of random thing that I wanted to mention. Every scene that Albert Einstein was in this movie, I just really, really loved. I thought it was really great. They kind of have this nice payoff in the movie at the very, very, very end of the film, where we finally get to learn the conversation that Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein had at the very, very ending of the movie. Because, like, we get this one scene at the beginning of the movie where we're in Louis Strauss's perspective, who's starting to walk towards Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein, but he doesn't catch on what the conversation that they're having. And it just is paid off really, really well after all of the intense interviews and things like that at the back half of the movie. And so it was just a really, really great way to end the movie overall. I really like that. So every scene that Albert Einstein was in this movie wasn't really so much the actor, but just, I don't know, for me, seeing him in here every time he was in the movie, I don't know why, I just really, really loved it. Another thing to mention while we're talking about Robert Downey Jr., I really liked how Christopher Nolan, he made it pretty obvious. It wasn't just like, it wasn't like that subtle editing that only certain people are going to notice. He made it very obvious in this movie of, like, the transition between black and white scenes and color scenes. And I believe the black and white scenes were supposed to be, like, Strauss's perspective and things like that. Like, while for the most part this movie is a character study of Oppenheimer, there's also a lot there's also a lot of time spent on Strauss's character and his perspective, and having to, like, just viciously defend Oppenheimer in the dramatic part of this movie. And he just did had a really great performance, and I like that Christopher Nolan utilized the black and white scenes for that particular reason. I think it was definitely a much purposeful editing choice, and I think it worked really well for those scenes. I know that was very complicated, but I'm sure you've heard it already, though, but Robert Downey Jr.'s acting and performance was just really great. I think this will definitely be an award-winning film for not only Christopher Nolan, but possibly even Robert Downey Jr., and many people have been saying, this just goes to show Robert Downey Jr. isn't just, Tony Stark all the time. He can do all these other different things. And it's like, where have you been? Like, you didn't know that already? The dude has talent. He is obviously able to pull off some really, really great characters, and it absolutely does show it in this movie. So, yeah, I think those are the main positives. I think the only criticisms that I would have for this movie is that you're definitely not going to be able to have an 100% understanding of this movie because there's so much dialogue. And also, it's a bit of a slow start at the beginning of the movie, but things really start to build up, like after the first maybe 45 minutes, and then once the bomb is starting to be created and they have like their test site, they're starting to build that up. Things really, really start to get exciting, and then the back half of the movie is just full-on heavy drama and dialogue, and it's really, really intense, and I love that. So, yeah, overall, I think this will probably be an award-winning, if not at least it has to be nominated for some kind of award, because I think Christopher Nolan was really, really trying to go for that in this movie with some of his editing choices and stuff like that. And I think it was really, really great. This was definitely worth the wait for me. I felt like it was forever, a very, very long wait to watch this movie, but it definitely paid off. So I know I started quite a bit in this review, but it's just because I really, really cared about this movie. I really, really had a great time with it, and I was very much anticipating it for quite some time. So, yeah, overall, Oppenheimer, I would rate this movie very, very high. I would say, I don't want to give it a 10 out of 10 because I feel like no movie is like a 10 out of 10. You know, no movie's perfect. But I would definitely rate this movie extremely high, probably a 9.5 out of 10. Only two criticisms that I would have is because this movie is quick-paced, even though it's 3 hours long, there is so much going on, so it's hard to get a grasp of everything that's going on. And it's a little bit slow-paced at the start, but things start to pick up after that, so that's good. But yeah, this is definitely going to go down as one of the best movies of the year for me. Definitely the best standalone movie so far, and I really, really loved it. I would definitely go check it out in theaters. Try to go see it in the biggest screen possible, IMAX, whatever the case may be, and you will really love this. I will say, this movie is probably not for everybody. If you're somebody who isn't a big of a fan of dialogue-heavy movies and you're more of an action fan, this movie's probably not going to be for you. Don't go into this movie expecting a bunch of explosions and stuff like that you're going to be amazed by. It's only like one big explosion in this movie, and the rest is just heavy dialogue and drama driven. So yeah, it's not going to be for everybody, but I really love this movie. I think the average person can, even if they are not a big fan of these types of movies, can definitely say that this is one of the greatest movies of the year. And so, yeah, Oppenheimer, I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. Enough rambling on. That is it for the review. I'm so glad I finally got it done. And stay tuned for future content. Like I said, we got a lot coming up next month. And any other potential content, stay tuned for that as well. And I believe that is it. Like and subscribe, guys. And I will see you next time.